I am coming on the last day of Epilepsy Awareness month in the US, but I think it's really, really important to share some different things about epilepsy that I think everyone should know, and also seizure first aid, because it's so, so important. And also I realised that I haven't done an update since March on our journey, and I think there's lots of I love to share about it because there's lots of things that I didn't know before my son had his first seizure. And so if anyone can learn something from our journey and our learnings, then it's worth it. So Epilepsy Awareness Month, usually I am sharing all over the place during any awareness month linking with epilepsy, seizures, anything like that. But this month it's taken me to the last day, and that's because it's been particularly tough, and there's, with epilepsy, the key thing is that it's very unpredictable, and new things suddenly pop up out of nowhere, it seems, because the brain is so complex. The brain is developing and changing, especially in the childhood years and in the later years as well, and the teen years especially. The brain is developing and changing, and so different things can impact it. But something that everyone should know is that seizures, there's over 40 different types of seizures, and so that is something that I'm really passionate about. My son doesn't have the typical ones that you may see on the TV, the tonic-clonics with the shaking on the ground. He has something called focal seizures, focal impaired awareness seizures, focal awareness seizures, nocturnal seizures. And so he has 3 different types mainly. And they sometimes may come across, if you came across someone who has just come out in the postictal stage, the stage after the seizure, you would see a lot of confusion, a lot of shouting, a lot of scaredness, lots of things like that, that you wouldn't necessarily, as a passerby in the street, realize. I wouldn't have realized that is actually, a seizure, and then after a seizure. And so therefore it's really important to know that it's not just someone could be having a seizure and still be sat up. Someone could be having a seizure and not shaking. There's lots of different types of seizures that often aren't necessarily talked about in different training and things like that. So that is super important that everyone should know. Another thing that everyone should know is that seizures can happen related to epilepsy and also not related to epilepsy. So in May, my daughter had her first seizure, and that was linked to fever. So the young kids can have febrile convulsions, although that one wasn't convulsive, it wasn't shaking, it was focal, like my son's are. But then since then, she's had 3 more, 2 linked to fever and 1 not. So they're currently going to be investigating and seeing if they are epilepsy-related seizures or not. But anyone, it can just happen. That happened where we were going to sleep, and this was about half an hour into her sleeping. I went in to check, as I do, because I check the kids, especially because of the nocturnal seizures for my son. And then I saw her having a seizure. So they can happen at any point. And at that point, seeing her having a seizure, my my thoughts were, oh no, not you as well. Because I know the impacts. It's not just a seizure, it's it's the after impacts. As I mentioned in March, my son had cognitive regression in his handwriting and reading, and recently there's been seizures triggered by memories of a previous seizure. So therefore sometimes people are aware of when they are in a seizure, and therefore that can cause a lot of trauma, because there's many different feelings within that, lots of feelings of being scared and anxious and unknown feelings. So lots of things can come out of it, and there's a lot of emotional impacts as well as the side effects of the medication. So the second thing is to know that actually it's the impacts beyond the seizure, after the seizure. Some of the seizures, my son has to sleep for 2 hours, so that means that we can't go on with our day. We pause, we accept that, and we make sure that he's okay before we go on. But other people may not understand that is what happens, and so therefore I think it's really, really important to share. Also, the unpredictability. If you see someone, there's a lot of myths and things like that around, and saying about, people can swallow their tongue when they have a seizure. That is incorrect. And so that is definitely one thing, is definitely do not put anything in anyone's mouth who's having a seizure, because they could choke on whatever you're putting in their mouth, or it can cause a lot more issues than just being there, making sure that they are in a safe space, protecting their head, making sure they're not going to fall or anything like that, because with some, you get tonic, which is you get really stiff and then you can collapse. And also timing it and making sure that if it is longer than 5 minutes, that's when to call an ambulance, because that is dangerous, brain territory. So therefore immediate medical assistance is needed. Knowing that after a seizure, putting them into the recovery position if that's, if they've been unconscious, and making sure that obviously they're breathing, that they know that you're there, being reassured, giving that reassurance, because often after a seizure, the postictal stage is very confusing, and there's, they may not know where they are. My son gets so confused and doesn't know where he is or what's happened earlier in that day or anything. So therefore, after a seizure, it's really important to let them know that they are safe. And so those are, just a few things that I think are really important, and to know that actually, like I said, seizures can happen to anyone, and they may be epilepsy related, they may not be epilepsy related, and there's different conditions. So therefore, being aware of the signs, having a look at places like Epilepsy Research UK, places such as the Epilepsy Foundation, Epilepsy Action, lots of good information there about lots of different types of seizures. And just having that understanding that if you know someone with epilepsy, don't assume that you know what their seizures are like. Ask them about it. Ask them, how they feel afterwards and what you can do to best support them. And to any fellow parents of children with epilepsy, then yeah, I feel you. I'm with you, and it's hard. It's hard to watch your children have a seizure and not be able to do anything about it. But for me, as a Christian, I'm trusting that God is in control. But it's tricky that these things occur. So yeah, hopefully there's some useful information to help. Please do share some of that information, so that if you come across someone on the street, and you can actually help them and be a help and support them and be there for them. Thanks for listening, and I will see you soon.